Hello, and welcome to Half the Year in Hell, the podcast for the ones who are made to carry what wasn't theirs. This is a place where we speak from the underworld and help you make your way on out.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for therapy. We are licensed therapists, but we are not your therapist. This podcast is for education and liberation, not diagnosis or treatment. Some episodes contain strong language and content related to trauma. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey y'all, this is Aunge. Excuse the timing. We're a day off from Libra season. We're currently in the middle of a move. So that's why we missed it. But anyway, enjoy today's episode. We had a lot of fun recording it.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Half the Year in Hell. It's fall and we're back for Libra season. And we just wanted to give a shout out and say happy birthday to one of our favorite Libra viewers, and just happy birthday to all the Libras. And we're answering a question from a Libra viewer. And the question is, why do scapegoats get in relationship with narcissistic partners? Which is such a Libra question to ask.
It's a very Libra question.
So I thought it was a great question for Libra season. And also, we're trying out this new format. Give us feedback if you can. Let us know what you think about tying the episode themes to the zodiac, because it's something we're thinking about doing going forward through each season. Because we love astrology.
We do love astrology. Also, I'm Ange.
And I'm Sasha. I forgot to say who we are. And welcome back to Half the Year in Hell. And this is Percy. He's cold. He's got his hoodie on too. See y'all, and he's adorable.
And Surma's doing what she normally does, which is being nosy and staring at the neighbors. So yeah. So that's such an important question about why scapegoats choose narcissism, or not choose narcissism, why they choose narcissistic people and why they tend to go back into a narcissistic system. So I guess my question for you, just kind of like scaffolding the episode, is what are kind of like the bare bones? Like why do we choose narcissists?
Yeah, I think this is such a big question to answer. I mean, I think we got to explore it through the episode. And I'm also just like thinking about why would a Libra ask this question? And so when I think about Libras, I think about balance and fairness, and they're always trying to seek connection. And when I think about how I experience Libras interpersonally, whether that's in therapy or outside therapy, I think it's like they are really have a lot of priority on relationships. And whenever I start seeing people who are getting really obsessed with belonging and connection and acceptance, not even connection, actually, I think there's a big difference there. It's more about acceptance, especially with peers. And I think that the question was asked about romantic partners, but I also experience it as something that happens to scapegoats in friendships and community. They seem to scapegoats seem to be attracted to narcissistic communities. And so I think like maybe when I'm thinking about this through a Libran perspective, that maybe the balance can also be about not always trying to, like when you're trying to switch this into a healthy way, maybe it's less about trying to get mirroring and more about trying to find this balance between yourself and the other person is usually how I talk about it. But I just notice whenever I ask people about this, when I notice that some people are very, very obsessed with peer recognition to the point that it's becoming crippling, I'm always like, do you have Libra somewhere in your chart? Like, I know that there's somewhere in your chart that's what's happening. And so I think like the thing that happens when we're saying the why, I think where it starts is you got to start exploring if you were a scapegoat in your family system. And this is this whole thing about how the family system is echoing what's happening in the broader community. So if you were a scapegoat in your family system, then it makes sense to me that you have been attuned in a certain way to end up in relationship with narcissists. And I don't think that scapegoats seek relationship with narcissists. I think that as humans, we seek what's familiar to us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been scapegoated in your family, we're now talking about attachment system. And so when you've been scapegoated in your family, your attachment system is wired in a certain way. And so you're often, people are not even, it's not even that they like, they're like wanting to be abused or wanting to be with a narcissist. It's like they're wanting to sometimes even fix at a subconscious level what happened in the attachment rupture. What do you think about that?
Oh, there's a phrase that you introduced me to. It's called repetition compulsion.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that I understand it is repetition compulsion is when you experience something and you're just really trying to figure out like what it means or what the meaning is behind it. So you just kind of like keep moving towards these familiar patterns over and over and over again, trying to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
I think another word for it is like a complex, like
Mm-hmm.
working through complexes.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, you're experiencing some kind of trauma, and through experiencing that trauma, you're trying to figure out why it happened. Like, why did this person interact with me in this way? What is it about me that like caused me to be in this interaction? Like, am I not good enough? You're essentially just like trying to like pull at these different strings to find an answer. And the problem with ended up in these situations where there's repetition compulsion is you're usually attracting people that are similarly narcissistic.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually probably not going to be the resolution that you need, because if your mom, for example, is a narcissist and then you end up with a partner who's a narcissist, then like it's the same relationship. There's really nothing to figure out.
But I also think that something that happened to me, and I think that I experience a lot of times with my clients, is it was really hard for me to understand why I was picking the partners that I did, because they didn't so much remind me specifically of one parent or another. I think that what was happening was I was finding people who were narcissistic that reminded me, that were familiar to my attachment system of how my family interacted with me and the patterns that I got. So I think where people will get stuck sometimes, like I think most of the people probably who are watching this podcast, not all of you guys, but a lot of you that are watching, and a lot of people that are consumers of therapy, is like you're thinking, okay, I'm going to try to find a one-to-one correlation. This person, and sometimes it does happen. Like sometimes it can be like, oh, nail on head with hammer. This person that I'm dating or married to that is a narcissist, my dad was a narcissist, and now I'm married to a man who acts exactly like my dad. But I think that our attachment system is actually trickier than that. And I think this is the part that can get really frustrating for people, because I think a lot of people will try to self-growth themselves out or personal growth themselves out of dealing with it. And the thing is, I was just saying this to a friend this morning, that we heal in relationship with others because we're a mammal. So our attachment system is looking for healing, and there's only so much that you can read or do. You're going to eventually have to take that chance and actually try in relationship, and you actually have to heal it in relationship. And for me, I don't know, like I have a lot of control issues, and so I get really frustrated with myself because I'm like, well, if I knew this, why did I keep on doing this? And it's like I don't think we have as much we're thinking that it all comes down to thinking. It's the thinking. We're thinking that it's all in the mind, and our attachment system is something that is hardwired into us. It is the mammalian part of us. You know, dogs, Percy definitely has a certain kind of attachment style, and I'm not going to call him out right now, but I'm not going to say anything anyway. Don't want to embarrass Percy in public because this is private and we don't talk about therapy things in public, right? So I think like, you know, people are seeking to heal that attachment wound. And it feels like you also have to think, when you're trying to think through it and when you're working in relationship or in therapy, I think you have to kind of like first start thinking about how did I experience my childhood? How did I feel in my childhood? What was my experience of my parents? Not who my parents were through their lens, not the facts, not the information. Don't get caught up in like, but my mom isn't a narcissist. You're not going to be able to think your way through this. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's what did I feel? What did I feel, and how is this feeling now setting me up for being familiar?
Whoa, I mean, that's such an important part, right? Because when you're going through your family history and you're trying to figure out, like, what were the dynamics? What happened? Who was this person? What were they like? Did I read it wrong? Is it da 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 da? You start to get really confused because the way that the narcissistic person is positing themselves is the way that you, as a scapegoat, are supposed to see them.
Yes.
So you're trying to figure out, like, okay, like, was I a bad kid, or did my mom not take care of me? Was I really just like tantruming all the time and being an emotional terror, or did my dad not want a parent and just didn't want anything to do with me? And especially when you have the experience of your parent or whoever it is that's narcissistic that's no longer here, maybe you've set distance and you don't talk to them, maybe they've passed away and they've been gone for a long time, and you're not sure if you can rely on your childhood memories. It gets really confusing, and then you start going down this weird rabbit hole of like, okay, well, if it's this, then it's this. And the place where I usually get stuck is the black and white thinking, where it's like, it's either this person was a terrible person and I have no good memories of them, or because I had a good memory of this person, they can't be a bad person, or they can't act terribly.
I love that. I love that. I love that you're talking about the black and white thinking. That is so true. And I think the other thing that's coming up for me when you're talking about this is like it's getting me thinking about not trusting your own intuition and feelings and experience. I think that part of the experience of being a scapegoat is the narrative control. And it feels like people are telling you who you have this experience of people telling you who you are, how they interact with you, what happened. And it can get really, really confusing, and it can get you off center. And so I think this is why Ange and I both put a lot of emphasis on somatics and being in your body. You know, one thing Ange always asks me when I'm not sure about something and if I've been gaslit is, what do you feel in your body? What's happening for you?
I mean, this is also the tricky part, and it's been a tricky part for me, and I think it's been a tricky part for people that I've worked with, and even like probably even between us, right? Is like, you are in this experience where people are gaslighting you so much that being grounded in your body feels unsafe.
Yeah.
So you're asking me to be in my body, and I'm traumatized and triggered, and like anytime I'm in my body, I'm feeling all these different emotions happen at the same time, because there's a backlog of feelings that like I haven't probably felt since I was like 3. And I'm trying to like make sense of them. I'm trying to slow my body down enough to like be in it, and it just feels really uncomfortable, especially if you grow up in a family system where you're not allowed to have feelings, or if you grew up in a family system where everyone else around you is allowed to have feelings, but you're specifically not supposed to have feelings because you're supposed to be a container for everyone else's feelings. So what ends up happening to me, I am an INFP. And part of how I understand the world is I kind of like intuit what other people are feeling. And I'm actually really good at it, which feels like it's a gift, but it's also low key not, because it makes it confusing for me to know how I feel. So let's say I have a memory where I experienced, I don't know, my uncle is extremely angry, and I'm trying to go through this process of figuring out whether or not he's a good person, and then I can't tell if I was experiencing anger in the moment or if he was experiencing anger in the moment, because my experience is being a container for everyone else's feelings. So how do I separate myself from this person and like not kind of like act like an emotional extension of feelings that he doesn't want to feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, so many ideas are popping up for me. So one of the things that I'm also still thinking about is like when you're talking about this thing with an uncle, I'm thinking I'm going back to now this idea that I talked about the narrative control, and I'm thinking about colonizer, right? And I'm thinking about how scapegoating is really a lot about interpersonal colonization and how this happens in relationship, right? So when you think about people who are colonizing a group of people, right? They're obviously making the narrative, but this also happens within a family system interpersonally, that there's an idea. Part of being the scapegoat is you don't get to control the narrative. You're the person who receives the narrative. And this is why I think some of it can be a spiritual practice, because when you're talking about scapegoating and leaving the scapegoat role as being a spiritual practice, and this stuff that we've talked about like remaking your own narrative, I do think it really starts in the body, and I do think it's a challenge, because either it's been unsafe to be in your body because sometimes you've experienced abuse, but also like you've at the very minimum, sometimes people like, well, I wasn't abused. Well, you might not have been abused, but maybe you weren't attuned to. And so, in order for you to learn how to be safe in your body and trust your body signals, I think you need attunement. You need other people to attune to you. That's part of the attachment stuff, is like somebody else attuning to your experience and being near you, and not interfering too much, but also not abandoning you.
No enmeshment.
No enmeshment.
Yeah, being able to know where you begin and where someone else ends.
Yeah.
Because so much of being around narcissistic people is they don't want you to have boundaries. So they like, it's not just like the boundaries that we talk about in therapy, where it's just like, this is my stuff and this is your stuff. It's also kind of like this weird thing where they're expecting you to like soak up all these feelings, and they're expecting you to soak up all their shame. Especially shame is, I think, maybe one of the biggest reasons why I had a hard time getting back in my body, because
because you've been experiencing everybody else's shame.
Because they don't want to process their own shame, right? So part of what makes people, or part of what influences,
and they feel entitled to not.
Part of what influences people to not do something different and not to choose maybe a more decent option rather than the option that causes harm to other people is you need your shame to be able to say, ooh, I don't like the way I felt when I did that. So let me back off of what I'm doing. Actually, I have to stem while I'm talking.
Because it's a lot. It's a lot. I feel it.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all noticed, there was some part of the video probably a couple of minutes ago where I kind of like sank back down into my body because I was talking and I was associated, and I'm like, I'm talking about something I'm not supposed to talk about. So that's why, like, if you see us, doing all the things,
you have to really, shake it out, actually, like actually get it out. I'm also thinking about the part where you said about enmeshment.
Yes.
And I feel like this has been coming up a lot in therapy, is what is enmeshment? How does it work? And I hate to just like keep on pounding on this idea, but I think we really have to understand that we're mammals, and that part of what we experience when we experience enmeshment, and I actually believe like, I think all families are enmeshed here. I don't know. I'm gonna put a pin in it and think about it, but I feel like all families are at some level enmeshed because we live in a system that's based on power
and hierarchy.
And so when I'm thinking about like enmeshment, it's really this idea of like your psychological contamination, and like having your, I think people really, because we live in such an individual system, we have gotten to this place where we forget that humans are a type of mammal. And so we are always with this competing instinct to be an individual and also be part of the group. And so what happens when you're in a family is that the family, like if you're in mesh, you don't have the freedom. No one has the feeling to think or act on their own. And it becomes very rigid. And then when it becomes very rigid, it begins to get to the point where people become stuck in roles.
Yeah. I was my first internship was at a treatment facility,
Uh-huh.
and they had this piece of paper that they came out with that was an example of the difference between codependency, rigidity, and having boundaries. So they were circles, and y'all please don't make fun of my hands; they're a little ashy, but I'm about to use them. So in the first example, it's a rigid system. So you have one person here and one person here. Are they interacting with each other?
Mm-hmm.
Not really,
No,
right?
no,
They're separate,
not
right?
there.
Are they attuned to each other?
Maybe we don't know yet.
Do they know anything about each other?
Maybe we don't know yet.
Okay, it's too early in the example.
Okay.
So this is the second family system, and it's like this. What would you guess that system is?
Oh, that's definitely enmeshed.
Why is this enmeshed?
Because they're all tangled up in each other.
You don't know where one begins and the other one ends.
Yeah, but can't you also have like rigid enmeshment? I think that's where I got confused. Like when you have people who are separate, right? We're thinking about this, right? Like from a point of view of BIPOC. But like when you think about white people, that was something that I learned when I was in school at Trevecca, is that you can have, I cannot remember what it's called. It's not avoidant enmeshment, but it's something where there's enmeshment, and it's also like, it's a distance enmeshment. Like the rules are that we stay in place, but we stay in place from a distance and rigidly. So that's something different. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just give a third example anyway. So, there's obviously nuance. And one of the things that they talked about is you can exist in several things at the same time. And for example, like an enmeshed system isn't always unhealthy depending on what happens.
Yeah.
So if you're losing a loved one, for example, some enmeshment is probably like a little necessary, right? Like we have to take care of each other. We have to kind of like blur a little bit of the emotional boundaries. And sometimes you need rigidity in your system, right? Sometimes, thank you. My ears are cold.
You're welcome.
Sometimes you need to be able to like separate yourself and have that rigidity with people that are unsafe. So the last example, let me get it out.
You're doing good. Actually, I think we're going to tie it together. Keep going.
So the last system is like this, right? You have two people and they're touching. What kind of system do you think this is? I don't look that ashy.
No. Healthy?
Yeah. You know why it's healthy?
No, tell me.
Because you have two distinct human beings and there's boundaries. There's like a space in between, but they can also rely on each other, and they can also like interact with each other without losing themselves or without being so far apart that they don't know each other.
Yeah, it's flexible. That's what I love. It's connected but flexible. I think you are making it come together. It makes sense.
Okay. I'm glad it makes sense.
So, like when you're thinking about being the scapegoat role, hopefully we haven't gotten too far from God here. We're both autistic and we love concepts. So hopefully we're bringing it back together. We usually do end up getting back to where we're going, but this is also unscripted, obviously. And there's also the ADHD. So this is also unscripted. So sometimes we do get off topic, but we're going to try to bring it back in also again, and then we'll go away again and come back to it. I'm thinking about like when you think about all these things we've talked about, enmeshment, stuck in roles, attunement, there is a concept that I cannot figure out who it is that I don't remember. It's an AFAB, assigned female at birth psychologist, I believe, that has talked about this thing in family systems of, and I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. Givers and receivers is what she calls some of the roles. This is another way that she talks about it, right? So when I was thinking about givers and receivers, I was also thinking about like the person who controls the narrative. And I was thinking about it. This person wasn't doing a decolonial lens, I don't believe, when I read about it. So I'm thinking about it from a decolonial like psychological trauma lens. And so when I think about a giver and a receiver, and I think about a patriarchy, and I think about a masculine and a feminine, but I also think about a scapegoat being a person who is the person who is passive, accepts the narrative, and absorbs all the shame. I'm just kind of like recapping exactly what Aunge said. I'm just bringing it together, right? So we've said that the scapegoat is passive. They're supposed to be passive. They're supposed to be, if you're in the scapegoat role, you're supposed to be passive. You're supposed to accept all the shame. You're supposed to be willing to be the bad one. You're supposed to be an absorber. You're not supposed to speak up, but usually you probably do, which is what makes you end up getting scapegoated. You're calling out the deficiencies in the system because you're observing, right? Which is why neurodivergence often leaves you scapegoated.
Also, you're not calling them out judgmentally or unkindly. Usually you're just saying, hey, this doesn't make sense.
Right. And so when you're thinking about being scapegoated and how your system has been attuned and it feels comfortable, not that it feels good, that it feels comfortable and familiar for you to be in relationship with somebody with this intensity. So it becomes this feeling of you're so, I think most people know about like narcissistic abuse and hoovering. So you are like, I got my match. I got my person who I like, the Lego pieces are fitting together. The puzzle pieces are fitting together. This feels familiar to me. They're the person who creates the narrative. And I think where our mind like kind of like fucks with us a little bit is we'll get somebody who doesn't on the surface appear. And this is where people get so upset with themselves and they're like, how did I do this? I already know that I wasn't supposed to do this. But it's that pattern. It's trying to close the loop. It's the repetition compulsion. You're trying to close that loop. So now it feels familiar to you that this person is the person who has this big narrative. And that you're the person who accepts the narrative. And you're just attracted to what's familiar. And just like you are familiar with that, I think the thing that people leave out is those people are seeking out somebody like you. They are looking for you. They're like a hunter. You are prey. When you are a scapegoat, you are prey. So this is why it's a spiritual practice. Again, I know I'm going off on one now, but this is why I'm saying that it's a spiritual practice, because you can talk about it from, I've talked about this from all angles, whether it's a religious perspective, whether it's a psychological perspective, right? The thing about evil is it feeds on itself. So the more that somebody is learning, like it's like when they have this, old wives' tale about like, don't give a dog meat, and once they taste blood, they're gonna always bite again, and all this other kind of stuff like that. It's a little bit true.
It is true.
Because what happens is when somebody has had this experience in their own system of being a person who creates the narrative and who doesn't have to accept their shame and who puts the shame on somebody else, and you've had this experience of receiving it, they're looking for you. And they probably aren't even doing it necessarily. They're not like, oh, I found somebody to do it. They actually have become so entitled at this point that they think that this is what they're owed. They're actually like horrified that you're asking them, which is why it's a spiritual practice, because you're like, actually, to me, if you allow somebody to do this and knowingly, once you know, obviously before you didn't know, but once you know, you're just like allowing someone's evil to continue unchecked, and you're actually feeding into it. So it's really like when you're thinking about what is love, hello, bell hooks all about love. What is love? Sometimes it can be a loving act for you to stop this cycle. But I think so much of it is like taking the shame out of it and understanding that you've been conditioned to do this. And this is where the tricky part comes in. And I want to go back to the narrative control and what Aunge was talking about, because I don't know if you have anything to say, and it's okay if you don't, but I think you speak really well about like the reality and what it's like what happens when people come in and how like they don't know that maybe they have experienced this role, so they're just like, no. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is when people come in and they're automatically making the assumption that they're the problem in the system, which makes sense, right? Because everyone in the system is either overtly or covertly telling you that there's something wrong with you, right? So they're coming in and you're trying to align with them, and you can't really align with them too much in the beginning because you know that they'll just completely disappear out of shame of someone validating their reality, which, I probably have done that to a therapist or two. But what ends
I've definitely done it.
Yeah. What ends up happening is as you're trying to align with them, as you're trying to validate them, you kind of like sprinkle in a little bit of validation at a time, and like it feels good for them, but they don't really know what feels good for them. But also that shame also creeps back up
because it's not the familiar role that they're used to.
And eventually, like when you've seen someone for, year, 2 year, however long it takes, what you can start to do is you can start to validate them in bigger and bigger ways, because they're able to take these little sips of validation. And once they're able to take the bigger sips of validation, they're able to kind of step outside the role. But what often happens is people are so ingrained in the role, and they're so afraid of abandonment, or not being a part of their family system, or whoever it is that's being narcissistic towards them, they end up going back into it.
Well, and they've abided by this, like you've told me this before, like they've abided by this rule that they're not supposed to notice a certain person is not healthy.
Much less the family system.
If they didn't, like, so if you're trying to tell them, if I'm trying to tell you your partner is like this, and you haven't been allowed to see that your brother, your kids, your family, your sister, whatever it is like this, then what I'm telling you is not making sense, because you're like, no, I'm a good person. And then the other wild thing that I've been noticing lately, this is something that is like really coming up for me. I have a lot of people that come in and they're like, I had really healthy parents, and my parents had a great relationship and they love each other.
And then you start digging.
Well, I think that sometimes what happens, and this actually happened recently to me, with some people, it's like a couple can have narcissistic energy together. Two people can be bonded in their trauma, or they can have this unhealthy relationship, and they can be so attached to the couple structure that now the narcissism is something that the couple is carrying, and there's blurred identity lines. And so now the kid or kids are scapegoated, or another person is scapegoated. So it's like sometimes your parents, maybe it seemed like you had a great childhood because they both are propping each other's ego up,
and also other people are propping their egos up.
Hello, Tragedy of Heterosexuality.
It's a good
great book. Definitely check it out, right? Yeah. Because I think like the social construct, I'm not coming for you straight people, but the social construct of heterosexuality is based on mutual ego propping. Actually, not mutual ego propping, one person ego propping another person more, but it is based on ego propping. And so I think like people have become so normalized to this ego propping that they can think, oh, my parents were wonderful, or my grandparents were wonderful, or this came out of nowhere, or I don't even know. Sometimes people are like, I don't know why my mom was scapegoated because my grandparents were wonderful and my mom is so sad and depressed. Like it can come up in any way. So I think sometimes like you might have experienced your, like a couple can actually be grandiose together. Like I have experienced many people where each person individually maybe not that grandiose,
but together
the vision is really grandiose.
The other thing that's kind of confusing about it is that you can have these two people come together and be grandiose, and they might only be narcissistic towards you because you're there to like soak up all their energy, but they're not narcissistic to other people. So you're over here trying to explain to someone like, hey, my mom pulled my hair or like braided my scalp too tight, and it feels a little weird and a little bit off. And other people will be like, your mom is a wonderful person. She's a pillar of the community. Everybody at work loves her, da 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 da. And it just adds on to even more confusion about like, why I must be a bad person because everything that's happening externally is not matching up to what my insides are saying.
And I also think when I'm thinking about like narrative control, and I'm also thinking about like the Black excellence narrative, and when I'm thinking about model minority myth, and I'm just also thinking about what is it to be a nuclear family and a parent, like I'm thinking about how sometimes people can be scapegoated in their family of origin because the parents have a very specific idea. This is what happened in my case, right? And I actually think my neurodivergence was part of this. And actually, I think my neurodivergence probably saved me from a lot. And I would say this is a similar lived experience you have, is like my parents had a very specific idea about how their story was going to be redeemed. Sometimes people's stories are trying to be extended, and their story is going to be redeemed or extended through you. And when they don't understand because you're doing something different, then they will scapegoat you. And so you become really familiar with being just like a disappointment to others. But I really think the real work is learning how to tolerate being on your own side. And I know that that sounds like it's very simple, but I don't think it is. And I think it's a huge hurdle for people in therapy. And I think people are like, no, I have a positive self-regard. And I think like it's can be very hard tolerating what did I feel? Because I think the other part of being a scapegoat is the shame. Part of it, I think like when you're not supposed to take your own side, and you've experienced when you've experienced narcissistic abuse,
yes,
you have experienced somebody who has kind of like described you without. So when I start asking people how do they feel, I'm asking you how you feel, and people a lot of times have learned to survive. I mean, this is how I learned to survive. This is how you learn to survive, especially people who are neurodivergent. We really like start surviving and thriving in these systems through pattern recognition and avoidance. And so hello autism is like an adaptation.
Why did you become a therapist?
Right.
I don't know, actually.
Right. Like I think this is like in line with the idea of autism being like an environmental adaptation sometimes, right? And so what's happening is you've learned pattern recognition, and you have stayed really cognitive because you've experienced somebody who is telling you who you are, and they're telling you what you're doing, and it's not based on logic at all. It's actually just based on this is what they feel. So you don't want to tune into how you feel because you think feelings are the problem because you're trying to overcorrect
and be overly logical.
You're trying to be overly logical, and they're just going off of how they feel and what their gut is. But I think the thing to understand is that like this is again the splitting. This is again the black and white thinking, right? So I think I've said this before. I know I've definitely said it in the therapy room. I don't know if I've said it in this space. Another thing that I'll just keep on going back to is like, right, like I think it's Ian McGovern. I can't remember his name. Ian somebody. He talks about the master and his emissary, right? And so it's like, what's it like for me to go into my feeling and intuition function, use that as data to then be interpreted by this? So when I'm asking you how you feel, I'm not asking you to only act from your gut, right? So if I say to myself, say that I get upset and Ange just said something to me and I am asking myself how I feel. I might feel angry and I might feel like I'm being persecuted, or I might feel like I'm being condescended to. I'm not stopping there with the data. I'm checking in with myself as a starting point. Now I'm beginning to ask myself questions. Where does this come from? Is this true? We're talking about an extra skill here, which is metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Metacognition.
A lot of people can't.
Thinking about your own thinking. So I have to start with how I feel. Now I'm starting to think about what is going on. But what happens to people is they never turned into how they felt. And so they're not sure about what's going on. So you're starting with, where do I feel this? Where is this in my body? What does this remind me of? Because now I can start going, is this really true? Is this really what I think is happening? Come on, Byron Katie, right? What's actually going on? Is this a narrative that I'm making up? And now, once I understand how I feel and I'm curious towards myself, now I can take an experience of curiosity towards the other. And when I start having a sense of curiosity towards the other, now I can ask you, I can say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, but I haven't decided that it's true. This is what you did. You put the plate on the table, and I noticed you put the plate on the table very loudly. And now I'm creating a story, right, Brene Brown? I'm creating a story in my head about why you did it. And this is how it makes me feel. And now I can be curious towards you, and I can ask you, hey, why did you put it? And you might be like, I tripped on something, and this is why I slammed the plate down on the thing.
Or my headphones were too loud.
And I didn't realize that I was being that heavy because I've been in my headphones, right? I don't have to. And so I can be like curious.
Instead of Ange hates me, they slammed the plate down.
Yeah. So I think having like a sense of curiosity towards yourself and others, and beginning to build a place of self-trust, is how we can like begin to form attachments with people who are healthy and secure.
And unentangle ourselves from people that are not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it makes sense why scapegoats move towards narcissistic relationships, like their repetition compulsion, the way that it feels familiar, the way that you've been gaslit, and like this is how family's supposed to feel. Like it's there's a variety of reasons, and I think that we're all over the place because there's not just one. Like
There's so many reasons. There's so
yeah.
many reasons. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also thinking about like how what part of what becomes familiar, and this is one that gets me. Part of what becomes familiar when you've been scapegoated, especially as a child.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a child, you're powerless. So when you've been scapegoated, what you've learned is that in order for you to feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go slowly because this is a hard one. In order for you to feel safe, you have to convince the person, your parent, your teacher, right? Whoever is in power, you have to convince them that of what you feel and think, and how you have to try to get them to see things from your point of view. So this becomes really, really normalized. And I'm going to tell you this one gets me every single time. I sat here and talked to y'all a few episodes ago about like when you look back, it's a pillar of salt. And let me tell y'all, I did this. I reached out to somebody. I had been a victim of narcissistic abuse. And I reached out to somebody and I was like, hey, I was very calm, but I was just like, hey, I don't like the way you treated me. You know, you didn't do well. It had just been too long since I had interacted with anybody who's narcissistic at a deep level like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, I just don't like what you did. This is what you did. And what I got back, of course, was a wall of vitriol.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Because narcissists cannot experience shame. So now I've made you experience shame and sit in your own shame. And there's this a moral freaking outrage that comes up. Like you just immediately become devalued and you're like, what the hell happened? And it's like, you have to start getting to the point where, like, in order for me to take myself back in that moment, and it took me out for a minute, is like, wait a minute, what is true for me? Why am I going to this thing where I'm trying to convince this person to believe my narrative of what's happening? Like a healthy person and a healthy perspective should be, I'm okay, you're okay. But this goes back to what Zamir always talks about like people who are narcissistic in their behavior patterns. It's player versus player. Whereas if you're a healthy person, you're going to be player versus environment. And so you're trying to come up with a win-win. You're trying to make it, I'm okay, you're okay. And you're always seeking out, I'm okay, you're okay. But you're in relationship with people who are not necessarily trying to make it, I'm okay, you're okay. So their mental model is, I'm okay, you're not okay. Unless you're supporting me and telling me that I'm right, I'm always okay, you're not okay. So now you're getting like all of this rage from the person, and this is where the repetition compulsion starts coming in again, where you're like, in order for me to be safe in my life, I have to fix this person. I have to correct this person. I have to make this person see me. I have to make this person understand me. Where if you are in relationship with people who are healthy, it's not that there's not going to be conflict, but they're not needing for you to, you don't have to be doing so much convincing, and you don't have to be self. That's a great way. Mm-hmm. You should not have to leave yourself in order for you to connect. Y'all should both be able to be in yourself, and you should be able to find a general consensus, and you should be able to find a third thing, which is this space, this relational space in between you where you can meet and join. And when you've been with a narcissistic person, or you've been a narcissistic victim of narcissistic abuse, or you've been a scapegoat in any way, you've just had more of an experience. You don't even know what you're looking for. So how would, like, you don't know that you're looking for somebody to be able to meet you in this relational space in between, right? Mm-hmm. In the temenos, should we say, the container, right? Like you're so attuned to the thing that has to happen is this person has to say something, and now it's normal for me to be chasing them and convincing, try to get them. And you have to be able to be like, no, I'm actually going to put this down. Mm-hmm. You're not going to see me. You're never going to see me. It doesn't matter. Like when people are in this narcissistic space, I cannot say enough. The reality testing is not there because they're seeing things through ego. There is no place where they're going to be able to meet you with, you could literally play a recording of what happened and they will find a way to scapegoat you still. So you have to let go of this idea that in relationship, I have to convince someone. And so you can actually turn a healthy relationship unhealthy if you are constantly in this space where you are trying to convince somebody that your way is the right way or that you're okay and you don't feel like you can be okay
unless they agree with your
unless
way.
they agree with you. If you feel like you have to start constantly trying to convince the person in order for you to be safe, go ahead and try to back yourself out and wait. Try to be sovereign, see what happens, hold, breathe, make yourself feel safe, make yourself feel accepted. I'm not saying put a wall up against the person, but let yourself feel accepted and connected. And then see if the person starts moving to meet you in the middle.
Because if they don't,
then you know what's going on and there's some data for you to collect. So I know this was like a long-winded answer. Do you think there's anything else we have today like to talk about on this topic?
I don't think so. I think the thing that popped into my head when you were talking about how like shame begets shame, is that how you say it, I guess? I'm thinking about Horcruxes, and I'm thinking about taking this one part of your soul and taking it and like splitting it off, and then being like, well, there's not really a whole soul left, so let me keep doing it 7 more times, 6 more times. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about the canon of that. You know why we're not talking about the canon of that. You know why
we're not talking about the canon.
But like, it's one of those things where like the more things that you do that are shameful and the more that you run away from your shame, the more that you keep upping the ante with the egregiousness of your behavior.
And the more you don't even look at it and you try to put it on other people, the more you get addicted to putting it in that Horcrux.
And if you really want to make someone mad that is not internalizing their own shame, you remove yourself as their emotional container and you remove yourself as their scapegoat, and they will lose it.
Because a healthy person, if you remove yourself from being from projection, because everybody projects. So if a healthy person is projecting on you and you remove yourself and you're like, okay, I looked at it, I examined it, and I don't think that's me. I think that's you. The healthy person is going to go ahead and go, oh, you know what? I was tripping. They might not do it right away, but eventually they're going to be like, I was tripping.
Instead of, hey, it's always going to be your fault forever and in perpetuity, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're bad and I'm good, and that's just how it works. Like, you cannot be all good or all bad all the time. Like, it's being a good person or a bad person is a series of decisions.
That's why it's going to always be, I'm okay, you're okay. That's the healthy psychological stance. Interpersonal.
I don't know. Okay.
All right, I think that's it. We will see y'all next time. And happy fall, happy Libra season. And if anybody has any questions related to this, please don't hesitate to ask, email, send us a text message if you're one of those people that has the ability to do so. And thanks for taking a deep dive into this with us. See y'all later.
Bye.
All right, y'all. That is the end of the episode. Thank you for listening. It was a rough one. So as an apology, here are some videos and pictures that we took on a recent vacation to Niagara Falls in Ontario. Y'all be easy, and we'll see you next time.